Hey, everybody. Welcome back to LA Not So Confidential. This is Dr. Scott.
This is Dr. Shiloh. Hey, guys. Been a while.
But we're back.
We are.
We're doing
we made
really
it.
well. Yeah, we're doing good.
Right under the wire for the end of June.
I mean, compared to last year, we're cranking through.
We were a hot mess last year.
Yeah, we're allowed a couple of weeks, but it's important for us, actually for both of us, it's really important to get this episode in under the wire before the end of the month because, as most of you know, I'm assuming that most of our listeners are LGBTQ friendly. This is Pride Month. Pride Month is celebrated around the world in countries that allow it, at least.
Right.
And to that extent, you know, the reason you have a Pride rally is because it represents the needs and movement forward of a community that's been marginalized, and certainly that is representative of the LGBTQ community, of which I am a member of that community, and Dr. Shiloh is one of our strongest allies, which we really appreciate.
Pseudo member, honorary member.
You're an honorary member. I'd give you a card. God knows they want to take my card away enough because I don't have the fancy dressing gene. But so this is going to be a weird one. We're going to focus on something that's going to sound really prurient at the beginning, but there's a reason for it. So this week we're talking about gay serial killers, and not to glorify the killers themselves, but to really point out that some of these cases were delayed, especially the older cases, not so much the newer case that we're going to talk about. But like we were talking about in Soul's case a couple of weeks ago, that the LGBT community continues to be a marginalized community even today.
Right.
In that it's marginalized for a number of reasons. Even though we can say that Pride moves us forward and unifies us and gets us out there as, you know, we're here, we're queer, we're just as boring as you. The other side of that is that not everybody can step up to that and own it. So you can be marginalized by being a person of color. You can be marginalized by being a member of a lower socioeconomic status. You can also be marginalized even if you're a white, psi-appearing male because you are in the closet, which puts you at risk in your attempt to explore your sexuality. And that's something that we used to see a lot, you know, in former decades, but it still exists, and it's actually really related to the case that we're going to start out with today.
Well, and a lot historically, and we're going to sort of go through these cases chronologically just to highlight some of that. But I like to see this as more of a focus on the victims. And we are going to touch on a case actually where the murderer was not gay, but the population which he targeted was. But really looking at it, you know, kind of taking what we've done with some more recent episodes and looking at the victimology of it a little bit more, rather than highlighting the murderers so much.
Right. It's not about glorifying them, but it is about looking at, especially drawing a parallel between Soul's victims and LGBTQ community victims because they're invisible. You know, the trans community is seeing a huge upsurge in violence against them. And I wish that, as much as we talk about being snarky and having our sense of humor, it is really devastating that the increase in LGBTQ hate crimes has just shot through the roof in the past 20 months, with most of that, with an even higher percentage represented by the trans community, which is just, it's unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable.
It is. And, you know, oftentimes, and I know we're sort of preaching to the choir with our audience, but people of marginalized communities just tend to be easier to dehumanize, which makes them easy prey. Who they may not be reported missing. People may be afraid to come forward as witnesses if they have a distrust in law enforcement. And that has definitely changed over the decades for the LGBTQ community.
And yet for cultural issues, immigrant issues who may have immigrated from other countries and have not really acculturated into Western society so that they have an understanding of their freedoms, or even if they do have an understanding in their first generation or, you know, original generation or first generation here, the idea that you can't be out to your family if your family's from the old world and still adhering to those value sets.
Right. In sort of our community, the psychological community, this past week was kind of a big move on part of the American Psychoanalytic Association.
Right.
So they actually came out and formally apologized for the labeling of homosexuality as an illness, whereas the American Psychiatric Association had declassified homosexuality from the DSM whatever number it was back then.
Right.
They declassified it in 1973. The American Psychoanalytic Association actually didn't officially jump on board with that till the early 90s. So it's kind of a neat, I think it's a really significant moment just to apologize and to say that out loud. And it falls in the footsteps of actually the New York Police Department. So we're coming up on tomorrow, as we record, tomorrow, right. June 28th is the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. And so NYPD has come out recently and verbally apologized for the raids, for the discriminatory laws that they held back then that led to that uprising and that movement. So it's a long time coming, and it's different to remove something from a book and to come out and apologize for it formally, even all these years later.
It does make a difference. It doesn't take out necessarily the sting. It is important that these things are happening, especially in the current environment where we seem to be moving backwards in some ways, which is incredibly frightening.
Yep.
There was a group of really, I don't even want to call them pastors, because I can't see how these individuals represent my understanding of Christianity in any way, but they, these sort of strip mall pastors all got together to have a protest recently, and made it all about sexuality, which, I mean, if we're going to make a joke out of this, if we can have some dark humor, the dark humor is that all of our studies show that the more of a strong gut defensive reaction you have towards a member of the LGBT community is only a reflection of your own sexuality on that spectrum.
The louder you are.
Right. So it's like,
more suspect.
Guys, you are just really calling attention to your own inner dealings, your inner workings.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd want to say, too, is as important as the Stonewall Uprising was, and it was a seminal moment in the movement, and there are a lot of sort of apocryphal, almost mythical stories about who started pushing back against the police at that time. And one of the most popular ones, which really is not proven, but that it was not even really just a passing gay guy. It was drag queens. Mm-hmm. It was the drag community that was like, we're sick of this shit. We're not taking it anymore.
Right.
I'm not going to get hauled into jail and beaten up again. And one of them picked up a brick and started throwing.
Started it off.
But it wasn't the first one. There have been other protests that did not lead to huge change, but actually only fanned the flames of difficult interactions between law enforcement and the gay community. But we forget that it was against the law, and there were many Jim Crow-type laws that were enacted in small clubs because they would try and, the gay community would try and meet in small, out-of-the-way places, but someone would always report it, and it would be they'd have these draconian laws of, okay, well, you can't dance, or your arms can't be moving.
Footloose?
Yeah, exactly. I wish it had as nice of an ending as that, because some of these, especially there was a horrific attack in New Orleans on an upstairs gay bar in the French Quarter, where people were burned to death because the doorways were blocked and Molotov cocktails were thrown in. And at that time, I mean, the police were somewhat. There were some that were trying to help these guys get out. It was a horrible terrorist act, but there's been a lot of enmity between these individuals and sort of entities against the LGBT community for a very long time.
Right. So we're going to start with just basically a review of. There's a couple of cases we're going to talk about that we have touched on before, but just because they are sort of bigger cases, we would be remiss if we didn't mention them here. So we're going to go chronologically, some overlap as far as date, but I wanted to look first at the trash bag murders, which we covered actually in season 2, episode 4 in our Exorcist episode when we did our crossover with Hollyweird Paranormal. If you guys remember, this is the case that I covered at the end of that episode. But essentially, there was a string of serial murders that were taking place against gay men in the West Village area of New York in really starting off in January of 1973. And January was a horrific month. Men were violently murdered within the same month, 7 men. So there were single men. There were a couple of occurrences of 2 men that lived together being murdered in their apartments. And all of them were part of the gay community and really specifically part of the leather community. And that went unsolved for years. And then about 4 years after the film The Exorcist was released, between 77, 78, there was another string of murders where gay men were being murdered again. And this time, their dismembered bodies were being washed up on the shore of the Hudson River in trash bags, dismembered. And they weren't even identifiable. They were so decomposed.
Right.
I think eventually they were able to identify the tattoo on one of the body parts that belonged to somebody who had been missing. But all these men had just been missing as far as people knew in the Village area. So when this was happening, a journalist named Arthur Bell, who wrote for the Village Voice, he really focused on the story a lot because they really didn't feel like it was getting the attention from the police and the media that it deserved. And clearly the community was terrified.
Well, once again, a throwaway population. So, you know, what's it going to hurt that a couple of these fairies, are dead?
Right. So he starts writing about this in the Village Voice, and eventually someone calls him up and says that he is the murderer and stays on the phone with him for a good 20 minutes talking about committing – eventually a man named Addison Verrill had come out. He was a really well-known film critic for Variety magazine. He was found murdered in his apartment. And as soon as that story starts to fold into the Village Voice articles, then Arthur Bell gets a call from somebody claiming to have killed Addison Verrill.
So interestingly enough, there you talk about, going back to where I was saying about marginalized populations, now it's not just a throwaway gay guy in the village. It's actually somebody who is well known.
Bingo.
So this is somebody who has celebrity and is respected not only in the LGBT community, but across another community, the theater community, the movie community.
Yes.
So this is someone, he's known.
Yep.
So it raises his street cred, I guess, or
people care.
Yeah, people care.
Because they know him. The killer stays on the phone and ends up saying, we were engaged in some alcohol use and drug use and back at his apartment, and it was consensual sex, and then something just hit me. I felt like I was being rejected and wasn't being reciprocated, and I ended up murdering him, bludgeoning him to death with a cast iron skillet. So that happens. Bell gives his info to the police, and then Bell ends up being contacted by another man that says, I think I was in prison with the guy that killed Addison Verrill. He confessed to me, and his name is Paul Bateson. So Paul Bateson was 33 years old. He was an alcoholic, worked at various New York hospitals. He was a gay man that was in the leather community as well. And the police basically went with this lead, picked him up, and he confessed pretty quickly to Addison's murder. So Bateson was the X-ray technician in the film The Exorcist.
Interestingly, he's wearing a black leather wristband with studs on it, so it was just little.
Which I didn't notice until after we watched
Al
this,
pointed it out to us,
and our friend Al pointed it out, and it was super eerie to watch after that. So afterwards, in prison, whether it's true or not, Paul Bateson ended up confessing to the trash bag murders. To several other inmates, and the police kind of took it at face value. So whether he did or whether he didn't, they weren't able to prove that. But he took credit for them, and he confessed to the other crime pretty quickly. So, but I think it's interesting, in all of these, I think my thought has been, okay, what is motive here? And majority of them, especially if they're sexually motivated, is going to be some sort of sexual sadism involved, and probably some diagnoses of some severe paraphilias, violent paraphilias. But I think that would be interesting to talk about as we go along with each of these cases.
Yeah, and I want to circle around to something. In doing the research for this episode, one of the things that I get very much in a tunnel and diving into research and trying to sort between the crap and the stuff that's actually verified. And I couldn't help but click on something, and it's just I wanted to rinse my eyes out when but for a reason you're gonna be surprised by. And it was on a site. I won't even give the site. It was like someone's blog. And the title of it was, "Why Are So Many Serial Killers Gay Men?" And I thought, okay, well, that's a big
you can see my face
assumption.
Right now. Like,
yeah, I know. She just did the blink, shake head. And it's some guy, and he makes a list of 25 serial killers, 25 male serial killers, 11 of whom identified as gay. But a list of 25 is by no means exhaustive.
Right. And not even half of those identified as gay?
Right. So, I mean, that's an interesting idea to look at it. But and interestingly enough, I thought, because I saw so many fucked up responses to it, where people are piling on and just saying, like, with all sorts of weird, bizarre, uninformed, homophobic responses, theories. There was the one, like, somebody was like, well, the violence comes from that germ that gets the germ infection that messes up the.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, no, please don't.
Right.
There's a germ theory that some doctor from Kenya, I believe, is proposing, which is just absolute bullshit.
Awesome.
But then one had, and then these are the times where you read the comments and you just think, yeah, the world just needs to be cleansed with fire, because this is how dumbass people are.
Yes.
And then someone wrote back, and actually in a much more calm manner than I would have, said, hey, that's not how stats work.
Good.
That's not how stats work at all.
Thank you.
And by the way, you're looking at, and then he actually went through the whole list and showed, well, yes, it is interesting that these people were drug addicts, and it is interesting that they were part of the LGBT community, and it is interesting that these were their, but those things are not connected, making them. We're talking about people who are violent, and just statistically went down to show that actually it was not statistically significant at all.
Right.
But it's just it's another one of those examples of, you can post any dumbass thing on the internet and someone's going to run with it.
Sure.
Just crazy.
Sure. Okay, so the trash bag murders, that's 1973.
And how long did it go on for?
Well, the group of 7 was in 1973 in 1 month, and then it came up again, another group between 77 and 78.
And unfortunately, there's not a lot of information, because he confessed so quickly
that they just kind of
we're done, and we don't know, like, well, what? I mean, it would be fascinating to know, like, why that month, and why,
I know,
and the sort of looking at the profile of his victims, what was he going for? Because it's very clear in some of these others that, especially when we talk about Jeffrey Dahmer, clearly had a victim type that he went after, and then that he refined over the years.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that month is just so concentrated. Either that's, if it was Bateson, there's just a lot of stuff going on there where he's in a frenzy for a month. But pulling yourself together enough to be able to pick someone up and go home with them in between. I mean, I don't know. It sounds exhausting.
Yeah, and working at a hospital, too. It's like he's got a full-time job. Jeez.
But if you want to hear about that a little bit more in depth, go back and listen to our other episode. Also, the director from The Exorcist, William Friedkin, he also did the film Cruising in 1980, which we kind of talk about in our other episode as well. But it looks at some undercover operations that happened in New York as a result of investigating those offenses. So that brings us to our next person you already spoke of, Jeffrey Dahmer, who was actively killing between 1978 and 1991. Interestingly, when I hear Jeffrey Dahmer, I don't think gay man first thing off the top of my head.
You think psychopath, right?
Yeah, I think cannibal, necrophile. There's all sorts of other things that I sort of have to go, oh, yeah, that's right.
Well, and there's so many interesting things about, we do have a lot of information from interviews with him that led, when he was in prison, before he was killed in prison, that he gave, besides having a relatively high IQ and known to be an incredibly awkward and strange guy, but very intelligent, he was able to express some of the reasons that he killed people in the ways that he did. I mean, it's interesting, like going back to what I was saying, that the vast majority of his victims were not white.
Right. And
although, you can say that leads to racial undertones or racial subtext to his inner workings, but it doesn't necessarily. It doesn't mean that he hated. And this is, believe me, folks, I am not defending Jeffrey Dahmer by any means. If we were here to talk about psychology,
right?
And this is a guy that, on top of being a psychopath, had severe attachment issues, and those came out later in many of the interviews that Jeffrey Dahmer was terrified of being alone.
Mm-hmm.
He had huge abandonment issues because his family basically abandoned him way early. And, it would be fascinating to have profiles on his parents because they were pieces of work, especially just abandoning their son the way he did, and also knowing that he had severe problems and just choosing not to face it. But his abandonment issues, I think, were one of the main drivers of his violence, and it just happens to be that he was gay. Being attracted to very
sort of
slightly built,
right,
effeminate young men who were, many of them were South Asian ancestry. There is the racial. If we're going to look at a racial subtext, the idea that we have, it is a stereotype, and it is not borne out by any statistics, except that we conceptualize in the West as people from Eastern countries as being submissive, which is a horrific and really terrible stereotype. But unfortunately, it has become sexualized for many straight men as well as gay men.
Right.
So, it's all great. Let's not be racist. Let's be attracted to who we're attracted to.
Right.
But I think it also warrants that you should understand what your attraction is about and not be attracted to someone because you feel like you are superior to them. Right?
Yeah, that's very interesting. It could be just about body type, and that particular race of people has that body type.
Right.
I had a client one time that it was really hard to decipher whether or not he met the diagnosis for pedophilia. And myself and another expert in the field came to this determination that he was just attracted to flat-chested, non-curvy women that were very petite, totally attracted to his first wife who met that body type. She didn't have to be underage, and he didn't necessarily want someone that was underage. But the body type automatically makes people think, ooh, child.
But that's
she
why
could be 40, 50 years old and he was fine with that.
Right. And which means, it's so necessary to look at all the factors rather than just making assumptions on these don't grab the closest ring and swing on that.
Yep.
There's a lot of ideas about Dahmer being traumatized as a child by a double hernia surgery. And while I will agree that is any kind of medical procedure for a young child can be incredibly frightening. Now, I would say, given the weird affectional interactions between him and his parents or lack thereof, those two things could be elements of a traumatic experience, but we don't have any proof of that.
Right.
We're just surmising, right. And people want to hang on that, like, oh, that's how it happened. That's what caused it. And we know that this level of sociopathy really comes from brain and organic structure and chemicals. He was smart enough to choose his victims with people that were, I really do believe that part of it was that they were marginalized communities and people that were either alone, lost, or they were in the gay community and from these cultures that were not particularly accepting of gay individuals. So they have to live this double life, So at that, and especially at that time when he was at his peak, was still not a particularly open time. There were gay areas of every large metropolitan area, and even now medium-sized metropolitan areas. And this made for ripe hunting grounds for him to exploit, and then further to be smart enough, like, hey, nobody's going to miss these people.
Right.
There were 3 men that got away from him, and it's interesting because there's one that's been on all the interviews. I think he may have passed away now, but he had done a lot of interviews in the last couple of decades, and the guy was so traumatized. I mean, he got away, and maybe for many years thought, well, that was weird and gross, and I'm glad I got away. But then to realize that he very easily could have been another victim.
That's when the trauma sets in.
Exactly. Just that, it can lead to hypervigilance and
a lot of symptomology could come up delayed once you finally find out.
Right. I mean, he had been handcuffed and he was able to fight it off and get out. And interesting, later enough, Tracy Edwards is this individual, and he himself was charged with murder later in his life for drowning someone.
Oh, wow. So
the span of Jeffrey Dahmer's murders was 13 years, and altogether they say 17 boys and adults. The one that is really shocking, and this is a very well-known fact about this particular case, and when we talk about marginalization, this is a kind of a oh my God moment, is that one of his victims escaped. The young man was a 13-year-old Laotian boy, very slightly built, got out of the apartment, was basically running down the street screaming and naked. And he was woozy because Dahmer had drugged him, and somebody called the police. The police show up, and Dahmer comes up and says, "It's all okay. It's just my boyfriend. We he got a little drunk. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it." Oh. Now, on one hand, you want to say, the police were like, "Oh, okay. Well, this is not a big deal." I'd struggle with it, thinking, "Wait, you're a professional, and this is a 13-year-old Laotian boy, and this."
Yeah.
Clearly mid-20s, late 20s guy is saying, "This is my boyfriend."
Yeah. They wanted nothing to do with it.
They just didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah. Whether they didn't want to take paperwork on it or just there was an ick factor for them where they're just like, okay, you guys figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll wash our hands of this.
And one of the things I found interesting in some of the writings about Dahmer's death, he was killed by another inmate while he was incarcerated in prison, is that there were several people that surmised that it was retaliatory because they were tired of him taunting other inmates with his crimes, which I find completely contradictory to the known information. This is a guy that basically didn't speak to anybody.
Right.
And nobody wanted to talk to him. And the reality, and I can vouch for this from working in prisons, is that guy just wanted to gain some street cred. And he's like, sure. Yeah, I'm going to take out Dahmer.
Yeah,
and
someone
I'll be
high profile.
Exactly. And once again, the idea that being LGBT is pretty low on the rung in prisons, or at least it used to be. It's not as bad as it used to be, especially depending on where you're incarcerated. But because he was having sex with underage guys, which makes him, in their eyes, a pedophile. That's an absolute target in the prison system. Right.
And just being high profile. I mean, that's like the trifecta of putting someone in segregated or special population right there. So,
and who knows if the guards, I mean, this is a very prolific killer, and the guards could have been very much like, not my job to protect him.
Might leave this gate open.
Right.
Who knows?
It happens.
So he met diagnoses for necrophilia, the necrophilia, sexual interest in dead people or body parts. I believe in his interviews he talked about finding it sexually arousing when he would cut into a body and feeling that heat radiating out of it. However, there's really not an indication that he was a sexual sadist per se, because he didn't, even though we hear of how he killed some of his victims, especially when he's trying to make these sex zombies.
He was trying to make sex zombies,
pouring acid into their brains. He really did not enjoy seeing people suffer or become sexually aroused to the pain and suffering. It was a means to the end of them making him making them his sex zombies.
And subservient. And once again, going back to that attachment issue, if I have a subservient, sex zombie or sex slave, they won't leave me.
Right.
Because, he felt everybody else had abandoned him. One of the other things that we talk about, we talk about the people that were traumatized, the victims who were clearly horrifically treated by him. One of the things they forget is how the members, the residents of his apartment building were horrifically traumatized because they were kept out of the loop while all this is going down. Like suddenly, the police descend upon this area and they start cordoning off everything and digging around. And this whole floor of the apartment has other residents, and they're lower income residents. They're people of color. He had relationships with those people. And there are interviews in some of the most recent documentaries about, and I'm not trying to be funny with this, he was giving food to people. He was giving, he was
baking.
He was he was cooking some of his victims and giving sandwiches to people. And they're dealing with the trauma of being in a relationship with this person, of having engaged in cannibalism, possibly.
Right.
I mean, there's no proof of it except
but how
it's
could
likely
you not
happened.
Think that?
So there's just diagnostically, there's so much going on with him because as much as you want to go, this is a really, really sick individual and a monster. There was some part of him that wanted to be connected to someone else in even a really twisted, dark, evil way. But then to cross that line and engage other people, one of the things he said is, I wanted to eat them, I wanted to ingest them, so they were inside me.
Right.
So why are you giving it away to other people? It's very confounding.
Without them knowing. Yeah, there's an interesting piece to that. He also probably met the diagnosis for pedophilia as well. I mean, he'd been arrested several times for exposing himself to children, some molestation charges, as well as, obviously, we talked about the underage sex partners that he was caught with, whether they were prepubescent or postpubescent. But I mean, he would lure boys to his apartment with, I'll give you $50 to take pictures of you, and then drugs them and fondles them, posing them and taking pictures of them. And then along with that, exhibitionism.
Right.
We've talked before in our paraphilia episode back in season 1 about paraphilias traveling in threes. So if you know about one, there's probably 2 others that are present for someone. And usually ones that go hand in hand are like exhibitionism and voyeurism, and then frauderism. That's a really common cluster. But these all make sense too, trying to except for necrophilia, but
right. Well,
that's pretty rare.
But that first triad you're talking about really represents developmental periods of a child's life. I mean, it's very primitive, it's very childlike,
right.
and there's not necessarily a violence. There's not violence connected to those.
No, it's more compulsive,
right.
anxiety relieving for whatever reason.
Well, that's what it turns into.
Sure.
But at first it's sort of in a normal sense. Exhibition that little kids go through is completely normal. Playing doctor
right.
because their kids are curious. It's when that turns into a kink and is pancaked with two others into that triad.
Right.
That's when it has the potential to be problematic.
Yeah. Obviously, his alcoholism. There's a substance dependence disorder there, as well as major depression was pretty well documented with him too. So a lot of stuff. There's also been some alluding to of maybe an Asperger's syndrome. I mean, clearly he was socially awkward, but there's been a lot of early years of emotional neglect too for him. So
right.
I'm sure that's just seen in a lot of different ways. All right. Anything else about Dahmer? God, it reminds me so much of Anthony Soul as we're talking about it again.
I know, isn't that? I mean, it's just
so
amazing. I mean, like the parallels. The parallels are amazing.
Yeah. So just to touch, we would be remiss if we did not touch on Andrew Cunanan again, and we spoke about him in our Emmy episode, in episode 2 of season 2, when we talked about the miniseries about the killing of Gianni Versace. This one's interesting because it's sort of all over the place as far as victims, and he was a gay man that was arguably quite the psychopath, as we covered in our other episode. But he has a few different victims that I think have kind of feed that classic psychopath, in that if he didn't need them anymore, he got rid of them, or they were only there for a little bit for a specific use, like his fourth victim, William Reese, who was just randomly, he shot him to steal his truck and take his vehicle because he needed it.
That was convenience.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they all fulfill some form of convenience, but once
right.
again, kind of what I was talking about earlier is that. Was it Miglin?
Mm-hmm.
His name? Miglin was a man of great means. I mean,
right.
extreme wealth. He didn't need anything, but here's somebody that had not dealt with his sexuality and was closeted, and that made him a target.
Right.
Right. This is somebody that has kids and a wife, very big in the community.
Yes.
Had a very strong religious conviction and ties to the church. So here's this, sort of talented Mr. Ripley type character that comes in and knows how to work it.
Yeah. Miglin was his third victim, right. and horrifically killed. I mean,
the level
hands
of
and
violence,
feet bound, stabbed him, slit his throat, just really up close, horrific stuff. Whereas his first and second victim were both, his first victim was Jeffrey Trail. He was a mutual friend between himself, Andrew Cunanan, and his ex-boyfriend that lived in Minneapolis. And I feel like that was really sort of jealousy motivated. He thought maybe they were carrying on, quote unquote, behind his back, even though he lived in California and was not present and wasn't with this guy anymore. He didn't like that they may have had a relationship going on, and just beat him with a hammer to
right.
death as soon as he saw him.
A different kind of violence. I mean, if we're looking at Dahmer, there's clearly hitting those trifecta of symptoms as a child: the killing of animals, the morbid curiosity with the structure and anatomy of dead animals, and killing someone so early. I mean, he was just hitting all the markers of violence.
And sexualizing the violence, masturbating over dead animals, and things like that.
Which is not what Cunanan was at all. His was psychopathy, but probably born out of pure antisocial. He didn't want to be with anybody. He didn't care. It was all about, that great scene where Darren Criss is it Darren Criss?
Yeah.
Who's attempting, he realizes, I'm watching this. I'm supposed to look shocked.
Yeah.
So let me figure out how I can imitate the other people that are surrounding me and their emotional reactions to this.
Can I just say I love that Darren Criss is in the new Taco Bell commercials? Have you seen those?
Oh,
for
right.
nacho fries?
Yeah, Josh Duhamel was doing those before. You know, they're really clever.
I'm like, what is this?
I know, you think it's like a big movie.
I want nacho fries.
Oh, God.
But then someone like him that just won an Emmy is like in this Taco Bell commercial.
How much they must have paid.
Oh,
they
God.
must have paid so much money.
Can't even imagine. He's so good.
Wow. Pay off my student loans, Darren Criss.
Yes, please. So his second victim was his ex-boyfriend, Dave Madsen, who, after he killed Jeffrey, kidnapped him, took him on the run with him. So this poor guy is probably just trying to figure out what the hell's going on, just found out that their mutual friend was murdered by their friend. And at some point, he ends up just shooting him in the back of the head out by a lake somewhere. Just terrible. And then he goes on to murder Lee Miglin. And then when he's on the run, William Reese, and then eventually Gianni Versace. And this is all within a 3-month period in 1997. So, and we see all different. He's just really, talk about escalation and out of control, just beating someone with a hammer, shooting someone, slitting someone's throat and stabbing them.
They're very personal and intimate acts of violence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Close up, not a gun from a distance.
Well, I mean, he uses guns, but they are very close up.
Right.
I mean, walking right up on Gianni
Right.
Versace in the front of his home.
Right.
And then eventually, as the police are closing in, turning the gun on himself. So that's Andrew Cunanan. All right. So let's touch on the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando from 2016. This one, there was so many rumors.
Oh, total misinformation.
Lots of misinformation, great representation of how that happens in the media. But I was fortunate enough to go to a training last year where I saw this incident get debriefed by some of the law enforcement agencies that handled it. It was probably one of the most heartbreaking trainings I've ever been to. We watched all of the surveillance footage from inside the club that night.
Oh, my gosh.
It didn't have any audio, which I think made it even more eerie and just terrifying to sort of fill that in on your own when you're not hearing it. But to watch it was just awful. But so this was the shooting that was committed by Omar Fatin. He's 29 years old. He was from Fort Pierce, Florida. And this is a case of a perpetrator who is heterosexual, but with extremist Islamic beliefs. And his motive has finally, eventually after all the investigation coming out, is just his sworn allegiance to ISIS. Now, at first, what were some of the rumors you remember hearing?
Okay, that first of all, someone supposedly came forward and said that I slept with him, I hooked up with him from Grindr, which was not true.
Right.
That he was gay and had been, sleeping around with a lot of different men and was really angry, and that's why he was taking it out on the gay community. What else?
That he had been there like the weekend before, scoping it out, or was a regular at
he was
Pulse.
a regular. And people were coming forward and just absolutely, yes, I've seen him in this.
I slept with him.
Exactly.
Whatever, yeah.
And it was all untrue.
Yes. So all of that is untrue. And actually how he ended up at Pulse was just complete happenstance. He didn't even know that it was a gay club. So originally he had staked out the Disney Springs area of the Disney Resort down there, which is like here in LA, our downtown Disney. So it's shopping district, restaurants.
It's still Disney themed and Disney related,
right.
but
you don't have to go in the park. It's just somewhere you can go.
Lots
on
of
a
entertainment
weekend.
venues. Yeah,
Sure. So there's a House of Blues there, a concert venue. And that was going to be his original target. And a lot of this is coming in from, some of the interview from his wife who survived the incident, who was eventually they didn't end up charging her with anything related to his crime, but also surveillance footage. So there is surveillance footage of that same night of the attack where he goes to downtown Disney. He actually has a stroller with the guns inside the stroller. And he's going back and forth in front of the House of Blues and really just gets freaked out because there's such a law enforcement presence. And it gave me chills because there's so many of these shootings that take place in concert venues now that, just think this would have been easily just another one.
Right.
And really just, especially after watching the documentary about the one in France or in Paris, just horrific because there's such similar as with the nightclub, there's just a discombobulation when you don't know what you're hearing and is it fireworks? And, I think of Route 91, the Vegas shooting, and your mind is just not, this is a place where I'm going to be focusing on trying to keep myself safe.
Right.
You're being entertained, and there's all kinds of noises going on.
Which is how terrorism works.
Right.
The whole idea of terrorism is trying to instill an underlying, ongoing, chronic sense of fear that throws people off balance.
That you can't even go do those regular things
right,
anymore.
So it throws a culture and a society off balance. And
sure.
that's the motive right there.
Yes. So he gets freaked out because there's so many cops in front of the House of Blues that he leaves. He goes, sits in his van, pushing a stroller with guns in it, has a minivan with more guns and ammo in it, and literally Googles nightclub to see what's closest. And Pulse nightclub comes up as the first result. So that's how he ended up there. He does park and without any weapons go in and kind of scope it out. But I mean, this is minutes before he then decides to go back out and arm himself and come back in and start shooting. So he, obviously it didn't matter, or maybe he thought it was a better target once he was able to go in and scope it out that it was a gay club. But there's the surveillance footage of him in front of the House of Blues at Disney Springs is available online. You can find that. But eventually he goes in there, he murders dozens of people, and the SWAT team is called, and there's a standoff. There's some negotiations that go on. It was really interesting to listen to those because typically you don't get to negotiate with people who are terrorists or extremists in their beliefs, because they're just ready to die and there's nothing to negotiate. So he picks up the phone a few times and is just not listening. He's just spouting some extremist views and hanging up. And then a couple of times they do get him on the phone and he listens a little bit, but there was really not much of a back and forth when it comes to negotiation with him. But he was eventually shot and killed during the SWAT standoff. But yeah, there's no reliability or truth to the fact that he had ever been there before. It was really just happenstance. But obviously really, really impacted the gay community, I think, all across the country.
Oh, the images are horrific. And I think it's so important. And I mean, the number of victims, 39, is it?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Which is just staggering. That's just a staggering amount of victims, and all young. I mean,
they had nowhere to go. I mean, I'm telling you, this video,
there was no way to run.
They were laying down, trying to hide underneath each other. It was just awful.
Yeah, there was one of the victims who this is absolutely heartbreaking. All of them, it's heartbreaking. Such a loss and such wonderful memories that are posted online about all of them. But Eddie Jamald Roy Justice, a 30-year-old accountant who was living in downtown Orlando. And he was one of the ones that made it into the bathroom.
Right.
And they were all crowding into the bathroom. And he texted his mom at 2 a.m.,
Yep.
waking her up and said, "Mommy, I love you. they're in the club shooting or they in the club shooting.
Right.
And then his last text was, he has us, he's in the bathroom with us, he's a terror.
Oh,
and
God.
then, you know, that asshole just gunned them all down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's horrific. It's just horrific. I mean, you know,
and that's where he ended up hunkering down as well. And where he ended up getting killed was in the bathroom too. But it was just, you know, obviously for the victims. And then in the footage, you see the police officers once they make entry into the place, and it's dark and there's strobe lights and the music's still going. And you think, God, how difficult to clear a building with an active shooter with all this going on, and then victims on the ground screaming out. You know, just you think as a first responder, what a nightmare.
It is a nightmare. And I'm not a DJ. I'm not a club owner. I don't know how practical this is. But today with electronics and how everything is so compact, maybe one of the things for safety's sake, they need to have a kill switch, and a kill switch that just you flip it and all the house lights come on and the music turns off.
Yep.
You know,
just
so that
this panic switch for sure. I don't see how that wouldn't be super easy to do, because talk about cutting down the confusion. And he then went into a gun battle with those first responding officers, and they were able to get people out, have the SWAT team come in and, try to get him out, call him out, and then eventually having to go in after him.
It should also be, we also need to note that it was not all the victims, it wasn't only male victims. There were women that were killed as well.
Right.
Some were members of the LGBT community, some were straight and just there with friends for a great night out, and they became victims as well.
Right. Okay, so that motive is obviously unique to kind of the other ones we're talking about. And so that one's very recent. The next one is sort of even more recent in a way, but also could span decades. So we're jumping around a little bit. But this is the case of Bruce MacArthur in the Toronto Gay Village murders. So I am not going to do this justice like the Uncover podcast did. All of season 3 is on this. It's called The Village. It's fantastic.
How many episodes is it?
13-ish,
okay,
I want to say. It is so good. And everything that comes out of CBC Radio Canada is so good.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's great.
Someone Knows Something is one of my favorite podcasts. And just Canadians can just get people to talk. They just have such an awesome demeanor about them that even when you're sitting down with the cops and trying to get them to give you information about their investigation, you just want to open up to them. And there's a really good Vanity Fair article that you and I read leading up to this as well. So interestingly, Canada has less murders in the entire country than the state of Ohio does. I think last year it was like 620 something.
Right.
That just blows my mind.
It's an incredibly low homicide rate.
Blows
very
my mind.
low.
They have one forensic anthropologist for the entire country. I can't even think of how many we have in LA County, but that's just insane that this one woman is doing all of that. But, well, she's not doing a lot, I guess. But Toronto is really a place that's known for its inclusiveness. Half of its population identifies as a visible minority in some way. So you just think about how safe and included people of the LGBTQ community or minorities feel living and working and expressing their lifestyles in Toronto. What a great place that could be to live.
Right. And even further distilled down to the village itself, where I don't like to use the term what we used to call gay ghettos,
right?
Which I think is a terrible way to frame it. But places that were typically sort of, I mean, an interesting phenomenon that happens is these some what have tended to be low income-ish areas that then are populated by gays, and over the years they become incredibly gentrified because you've got this incredible talent base and work base that come in that are I'm not saying that every gay. I don't have that gay creative gene. I wish I did.
You're so talented. You're such a talented gay.
I know. It's like they're going to take my card away. You're just not stylish enough.
Not stylish enough or talented enough.
Right. But, that's one of the things that's really tragic about this particular incident is, in interviews with people living in and working in the area in Toronto called the Village, talk about that their safe place has been taken away. That this is the place that we were supposed to be able to be safe and we can interact with each other and we have protection from the outside world,
right.
Which, and that exists in several cities. We have West Hollywood here in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. It's not the only gay community. There's Silver Lake, and every little suburb around has their own gay areas. And even my hometown in Huntsville, Alabama, has a thriving gay community. And you want to feel safe, and somebody like this, a really disturbed individual, took that away from these people. Also, because it's a different victim pool than we've talked about. While it is men of color, it was middle-aged men of color, right. Which is kind of mind-blowing.
It is. So let's talk sort of how Bruce MacArthur came to be arrested and sort of the more recent murders, right. Because we kind of work backwards from there. But by June of 2018, investigators were looking at 8 victims, men who had gone missing. 6 of those were Middle Eastern or South Asian, and not all of them were out. So I think a couple of them had wives and children and were sort of living these double lives. But yes, middle-aged. And they had all disappeared from the Church and Wesley neighborhood, also known as the Village, between 2010 and 2017. So in 2012, the Toronto Police Service actually forms a task force called Project Houston, as in Houston, we have a problem, that within a year, they really can't come up with any good leads. And by 2013, the task force is shut down. And then 5 more men end up going missing. So they have nothing, and it's still happening. So by 2017,
and also let me just say, in the materials that we read, there was one point where half the guys had gone missing, and the police were saying, "There's no serial killer."
Yeah,
it's like I don't think so.
Right.
I think you've already got once we were going at 3 missing
from this.
Clearly,
yeah, it's pretty evident. And I think that's a common tactic, too, with police, because they don't want to freak out the public. It's so hard for them to say, yes, there's a serial killer, and we got nothing. Could you imagine? I don't think they should be lying about it. I think they should say, we're considering it. It's an avenue, or it seems that way.
Yeah, but that could be a whole episode just there about large group reactions to events and how, crowd mentality can go wrong very quickly. But, going back to, I think it was in June 2017 when Kinsman, one of the victims, disappeared, and he had been known to be in a relationship with the guy.
Right.
And he goes missing, and that was a big tell because this man was really well known in the gay community, and the bartenders was very well liked, very, very well liked. Mm-hmm. And then the police started that second task force.
Right, Project PRISM.
That was PRISM. But even in December of that year, the police were going, no, there's no evidence of a serial killer.
I know.
Like, oh my God, guys, come on.
Yeah, you're right. They took it right up to the end. So they start this second task force in 2017, and this is when they start looking into MacArthur because they are able to link that he had his own landscaping business, kind of mobile landscaping business. And
another killer in a van.
Another one in a van. And he had hired a couple of the victims, and it was also known that he was in on and off again relationships with them. So they start to look at him a little bit more closely, realize, ooh, he's got a history of violence here. Mm-hmm. In 2001, he was with a man and just hit him in the head with a lead pipe at one point after they went back to one of their apartments, and turned himself in afterwards to the police and said, I don't know why I did that. Yet he brought a lead pipe with him.
Oh.
So there's a little bit of planning.
Well, you
there,
never know when
but,
you're going to need a lead pipe.
I don't know why I did it.
Was he playing Clue?
Oh my God.
Jeez.
It's my favorite game ever. See, who does he look like? Well, his nickname was Santa. Because,
yeah, there's a really creepy picture of him as a Santa Claus. I mean,
so he did seasonal work at the mall as Santa. So maybe he's a Colonel Mustard. I don't know.
Yeah, he's one step away from being a carny as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. But looks like everyone's uncle. I mean, just kind of a nice looking older man, goatee, white hair. Yeah. So yeah, he has the lead pipe or metal pipe incident in 2016. Oh, he pled guilty to that, by the way. So he pled guilty to that assault. And then in 2016, he was investigated for a sexual assault. But I mean, I could find very little info on that. There was like nothing, but he never got charged for it. But
it's interesting what his.
Bless you.
Thank you. I'll edit that out.
Okay.
Maybe. Interesting. And what in 2003, when that first charge came, or when he went to trial for it, as part of his sentence, they basically said, well, stay away from male prostitutes and don't use poppers. You're not allowed to use poppers
and then
anymore.
Slapped him on the hand.
It's like yeah. It's
don't
like
do that
I guess
anymore.
The poppers were doing the heavy lifting in that.
Yeah, right.
I still can't wrap my head around that one.
Jesus. It just speaks to our criminal justice system, and I think overall, I mean, just how they're treating this population.
Yeah.
Just come on. Just stop doing that, okay? And
once again, like we were saying, picking people that are part of marginalized communities and thinking all of these, East Asian, Middle Eastern men, with the exception of the one he was, Andrew Kinsman, that he was in a relationship with, a white male. The others, they were living double lives. They had something to hide. And it's interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see if anything comes out of psych studies on this guy or interviews over the years to see, trying to divine what his motivation was, or if there was like a traumatic brain injury at one time.
And so he married his high school sweetheart. They had a son and a daughter, and then he ended up coming out in his 40s and moving to the village. And I know you and I, kind of prepping for this, talked about, is this a case of internalized homophobia because he came out later in life, and is he just sort of stepping into this community later in life, and is this a manifestation of something going on there?
Yeah, and we're not making any suppositions. We're just being curious. I mean, internalized homophobia does exist, and it does.
Do you want to define that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the idea that an individual cannot deal with their own sexuality, and it can express in men and women. We don't see as much in people who are gender fluid, gender queer, because those two people tend to be very progressive and introspective and dealing with their sexuality. But for a lot of males that come from another generation or another cultural structure that doesn't allow for expression of their sexuality in a healthy way, they can take that, even though they want to be out and proud, for want of a better term, the cultural forces come to bear, and the historical intergenerational transmission of those ideas will be internalized.
So the self-hate.
It becomes
almost.
Self-hate or even like concentrated in one area. Like, I'm great. I am a doting grandfather, and I'm Santa Claus at the mall, but I hate this part of myself and the way it's going to come out. But I don't want to say that there is causality.
Right.
There may be correlation to some extent with violence, certainly with domestic violence. We know internalized homophobia can lead to domestic violence. But to this level of being a serial killer, I mean, there was underlying psychopathy there.
We're not going to say
with.
He has this self-hate in this area, and now he's projecting it out and killing people because...
Right. That's just too easy, and that doesn't happen that way.
Let's see. So, I think also what makes this one different is that, and probably what terrified the community, is that he's embedded in this community too. So, he lives here. He's known, and he's the one picking off victims.
Right, which going back to that kind of destroying the sense of safety,
Right.
it's also not that, it's not only that here's our environment, here's our community, and somebody has come in to start picking us off. It's, oh God, there's one of us that's here, which is kind of pisses me off more about the whole police thing, because that does err on the side of, hey, maybe encouraging people to look at patterns. And I don't know. I mean, I know that you converge on increasing paranoia, but just having people be aware of, like, hey, Santa guy has gone home with a different guy every week, and we haven't seen any of those guys.
Right.
Like,
right.
could be a clue.
I know. Yeah, in the podcast, one of the community leaders was saying, at some point we were telling each other, hey, before you go home with someone, tell your friend, I'm going home with this person.
Right.
Just so someone knew who you were going home with. I mean, how terrifying to just have to do that. So they, in this Project Prism, they start paying closer and closer attention to him. And eventually he sells his truck to a scrapyard. And so the cops go and seize the truck, and they find blood, traces of blood, and are in the process, test it for DNA. They sort of have this pseudo match to a couple of the victims. And so they are now putting him under 24-hour surveillance.
But wait, you buried the lead. How did they find the first bodies? You didn't talk about that.
I haven't talked about it because they haven't found any bodies yet.
Oh, I thought that had already happened. By the time they
put him under surveillance.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, folks.
That's okay.
No, I got my timeline mixed up.
No, I'm confused. Okay. So they put him under surveillance.
Right.
They're getting warrants for his arrest because they have these DNA matches. So is the DNA matches to then the bodies in the planters? Now I'm totally
Well, I thought
confused.
that's what tipped off that there was something about this, is that there was a load of artificial rock planters that had been found in the middle of winter, and that's how this one forensic pathologist was called in to, like, why was she called in to look at them? Anyway, as they sat these decorative planters in a room overnight that were then out of the cold weather, they warmed up and started stinking to high heaven.
Right.
They peel back the polyurethane or whatever the covering was, and basically he had just put these bodies in concrete.
Yeah, so these planters, at least some of them, and some of them were graves, was on the property of someone that he worked for.
Oh, my gosh.
That did landscaping for. This nice woman that's interviewed in the podcast. He did work around her place. He even brought some of the victims as workers.
Oh, he did a great job.
Oh, my God. Exactly.
He did such a good job, and he made these really lovely planters out of concrete.
Oh, my God, spot on.
I don't know why they smelled so bad, though. Don't you know?
So
I'm going to burn for that. Sorry, folks.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So they are in the process of getting arrest warrants and search warrants for his place when the surveillance team sees him go into his apartment with another man. And they're like, do we, don't we? Do we wait for arrest warrant? What? And they're just like, screw it. We got to go in. They go in, and this man is bound to a bed. And there's MacArthur, ready to go to town. The guy wasn't harmed yet, but they probably saved that man's life by just deciding to go
But
in.
even then, unless, and we don't really have details on that particular sexual encounter with that individual, but they could have easily have just walked into a bondage scene that was between two consenting adults.
Oh, totally.
That's not a killer.
Totally.
And then that would have been a whole other thing. But it sounds, it would be interesting to know whether or not this was as consensual as adults should be having consensual sex. Like, did the man know what he was getting into?
Well, a lot of men came forward since and said that they had gone home with him previously, and that it always turned into this submissive role play that got violent.
Wow.
So whether he was, strangling them or inflicting some sort of violence with an object or with his hands, they found some other people also said that were drugged and they would wake up and he was raping them or was, seemed like he was about to do something really threatening or harmful to them. They found photos of the victims after they were deceased on his computers. So some more
horrible.
posing and images. But the police really did a disservice again because they tended to criticize the community for not coming forward with information sooner. So the chief of police, or whatever they call it up there, that was kind of his answer, and they've called for him to resign.
There's a lot of tension. That was very badly done because that's a mixed message. Even like we were saying, is then don't. You told them there was no serial killer. You told them there was nothing to be worried about, and now you're pissed off or you're laying blame that they didn't participate enough.
Sure,
which was ridiculous.
So Pride Week last year in 2018 was actually very somber. Many chose to wear black to honor the victims. Although the murder had been caught by this point, they're just really grief-stricken still. The police chose not to walk in the Pride Parade, as most cities invite their law enforcement to do so. Much different this year. If you guys pay attention to our Twitter account, I retweeted this awesome parking enforcement officer up in Toronto, Adrian Porras, who was just lighting up Twitter at Pride last week. He was so awesome, dancing, and he was amazing. So go follow him. He's a lot of fun to follow. But this has now turned into, there are 23 disappearances and murders of gay men from 1975 to the early 90s in this area that law enforcement's now looking at. And they have not said whether or not they have ruled MacArthur in or out. But there's just...
And I think that's important to note, too, that they are being careful because in the past, and I'm talking not necessarily recent past, but we're talking 25, 30 years and back, sort of the approach of many law enforcement entities was, well, let's just lump all of them together.
Right.
And these are 4 unsolved ones here. They kind of fit the profile. So the idea that the Toronto police are actually going slower and trying to see if these, he confessed to 8.
Right.
He could have more.
Well, I don't think he's did he confess?
Oh, I thought he confessed.
Maybe.
Or maybe they just pinned 8 on him.
Yeah.
But, to be able to make sure...
Yeah, I'm okay with them going slow. I mean, I understand the families, want to see justice in it, but I think it also has to be done correctly. And it just needs to be done the right way.
Okay, you know what? I just found it. As of the 29th of January of 2019, he confessed.
Oh, okay.
To 8.
So this year, okay.
He confessed to 8.
Wow.
Very interesting. Very interesting to see what's going to happen with him long term.
Yes. All right. So we're going to end in just talking about a very local case, a very interesting and disturbing case. So this is here in Los Angeles.
Well, first, wait. Let's make one distinction. I'm sorry, which is one thing.
Yes.
We've been talking about a difficult way to approach the subject of serial killers. This next example does not meet the criteria for being a serial killer. However, it is an incredibly, I'll say that again. This is an incredibly problematic situation, an individual, and example of a disturbed individual who comes from privilege that has been endangering and involved in the deaths of individuals, marginalized communities.
There we go. So that it's a good distinction to make from some of these other cases that we've covered. So there's a man named Ed Buck who is a former West Hollywood City Council candidate. He's a big Democratic Party donor here in LA, well-known figure in the LGBT political circles here in Southern California. And just some disturbing things have come out of his behaviors and his home, really. So in just the last couple of years. So in 2017, he was investigated for the overdose death of a black man named Jemel Moore, who was a sex worker. And Moore died of a meth overdose at Buck's home. So it's really interesting because in The Advocate, which is online, and is it a print publication still?
Yeah. I believe.
I think so too. A publication that have kind of run with this story and bringing a lot of attention to it, that numerous young gay black men in LA, a lot of sex workers, have alleged that Buck has a fetish for shooting drugs into black men that he picks up off the street and takes them back to his home. And Moore, actually, so the victim from 2017 had actually written about Buck injecting him with drugs
his journals,
in his own journals before his death. So in December 2016, this is just really chilling. He says, quote, "I become addicted to drugs, and the worst one at that. Ed Buck is the one to thank. He gave me my first injection of crystal meth. I ended up back at Buck House again and got manipulated into slamming again. I even went to the point where I was forced to doing 4 within a day, period. This man is crazy, and it's sad. Will I ever get help?" And then his last entry says, "If it didn't hurt so bad, I'd kill myself, but I'll let Ed Buck do it for now." End quote.
Just tragic. Absolutely tragic. I mean, one of the things I would want to also add here is that Los Angeles has a very large transient and homeless population. We have the largest of that population. We have statistically the largest LGBT youth population that are transient and runaway. And then of that statistical group, we have a huge section of them being the motivator for them being on the street is that they have been rejected by their families. They have been thrown out by their families for being LGBT. I don't know about Mr. Moore, who died at the age of 26. We do know that we don't know if that was his only work as a sex worker. He may have been supplementing his income. There may have been other things going on. But what is very much indicated is that whether or not he had a substance use habit before he became engaged with Mr. Buck, it certainly was taken to another level. And even, Shiloh, you used a term called slamming. And my hope is that a lot of people don't know what slamming is because it's horrible. So,
and that's from his journal.
It's from his journal. And slamming is a term for intravenous use of crystal meth.
Right.
And we don't really use it in terms of cocaine, but it's pretty much what's used in meth. And it's part of the addictive process when you're trying to reach ever enhanced levels of being high. And this is pretty much
instantaneous.
It's instantaneous. It's incredibly dangerous. It's incredibly addictive for some people. And in this case, I mean, Mr. Moore was just suffering.
Right.
He was in the throes of this horrific addiction and, at the behest of this guy that had also, I mean, we talk about paraphilias, but the idea that he has just inculcated this particular fetish into his sexual repertoire that he wants to inject it into someone else as well as himself and then force them to watch pornography and masturbate or make them watch him. I'm going to get you high and I'm going to make you watch me do these things. There's just so many issues of power and control. Yeah, it's we could spend a whole hour and a half unpacking that.
Right. So Buck claims he's not responsible for Moore's death and he did not give him meth. The DA's office looked into potential charges for manslaughter and all sorts of things and ended up rejecting all of those charges and not charging him. And then just January of this year, 2019, another black man, Timothy Dean, who was 55 years old, and lots of people say that he was a longtime acquaintance of Ed Buck.
And a very different background. This guy was successful. He was not a person who was involved in the sex trade. or sex for work.
Right.
He was a fashion consultant. He was active in gay intramural sports that are, pretty predominant here in West Hollywood. This is so it's not like there was a particular profile that he was going for, but this guy, clearly Mr. Buck's motivation had to do with these fetishes around drug use. Allegedly, yes.
So Mr. Dean was also found dead in Mr. Buck's home. Very similar circumstances, suspected overdose as well. So there's an organization, a racial justice group called Color of Change, and they have put together a petition. I just wanted to read what the petition says. It's really short, but they're promoting that something really needs to be looked into a little bit more closely here, that he can't get away with his privilege and his status just skirting the law. So the petition says the tragic and demeaning deaths of both Jemel and Timothy has not persuaded District Attorney Lacey to prosecute Ed Buck. No other black men should have to die before the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and the district attorney take action. Ed Buck has created a system of abusing the vulnerability and poverty of black men, many whom have been described as being HIV positive and who were not addicted to drugs until coming into contact with him. So,
which we should also say, that's another. HIV and crystal are a horrific mix. Individuals, we live in a time now where individuals who are HIV positive, it is a manageable condition. There are wonderful medications. We now just recently, and this is actually some good news, we actually have our first individual with HIV who has lived to the age of 100. Now that's a miracle coming from what my experience was in the early 80s when all of my friends were getting sick, and that's we may use that in another episode coming up, but the world is very different. However, one of the things that we do know about the effects of crystal meth, which is a horribly toxic drug, so far from anything. I think there is sometimes there's still ephedra that's used in the making of it, but it's just poison. It's absolute poison, and it literally destroys an immune system. That's if you're slightly impaired, it will absolutely destroy your T cells.
But it's an escape. It's a way to feel better for a moment. It's classic substance abuse coping.
But you also wonder, were these people? What was the process, or what was the alleged process to bring someone into this level of use and this? It's very clear to anyone that's an adult and is aware of the effects of drugs. Nobody in Southern California doesn't know how bad meth is.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, we've all seen Faces of Meth memes.
Right.
It's awful. We've all watched Cops. Come on.
Exactly.
All right. I don't know. Any parting words for that before we get to just
don't do drugs. Well, that's the first one. Don't do drugs. You know what? No, I will say this is that. You're my best friend, and we share so much with each other. And you have been, from day one, clearly an LGBTQ advocate. Never. That's amazing for me. There is a little bit of an age difference between us, but we hit it off immediately in our friendship.
Right.
And who I was and who my husband was never. That was just not
second
even
nature.
A blip
Completely.
On the radar of our relationship, which is wonderful because I grew up in a time where that wasn't always the case.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're living in a time where the divisiveness, and I know I've talked about this, and I'm so sorry if people are bored in hearing it, but there is an us versus them mentality that is coming back up. And okay, you know what I'm going to end it on? I know how to end this without getting too maudlin, so I apologize, folks. I'm going to the dumbest ass thing ever that I've heard of in the longest time is the fucking straight pride parade in Boston.
Oh, God.
With Milo Yiannopoulos, who's one of the most horrifically disordered gay individuals. No, he's a gay he is a horrifically disordered individual who happens to be gay, and is so infinitely punchable. And I mean, I would love the chance to debate that asswipe. He's going to be they're calling him the mascot. I mean, this is just a bunch of really, the idea of pride, the reason that pride exists is because we are trying to bring people back to a baseline of understanding that we're all equal and we all deserve the same rights, regardless of our race, creed, culture, gender identification, sexual expression. This is who we are. We all are in this together. We're a community of the world, and we shouldn't be marginalized. And pride is the way that we make people know that we're here and we're not going anywhere.
Right.
Straight pride is every day.
It absolutely is every day. The amount of privilege that comes with being straight is incomprehensible. But that's really interesting. You don't want to go to Boston instead of Chicago in a couple weeks?
I don't know.
See that?
Well, you know what? Dan will probably be filming. He's about to go on another project, and it's probably going to shoot in Boston. So, Boston. And nice. I love the city. And you know what? Some of the nicest people, like I had a great time. He was there filming Surrogates years ago, and we had a blast.
I remember that.
But I'm also kind of gleefully, evilly laughing, going, I can't wait to see how many Yahoo Billy Bobs show up to that and the protests. But what I do hope for, and I hope we all don't let it go to violence.
I just hope my wish would be it got zero attention.
Well, that's the way it should.
No one was standing on the sidewalk. There's no cameras. Just what are you idiots?
Well, look, and that's how you deal with narcissism, and that's how you deal with sociopathy. Is you make yourself the gray rock. You make yourself as non-reactive and let them peter out. And there's power in that.
Oh, it works so well.
Yeah, and we need to not react. But then again, I do understand if somebody wants to, they'll do it.
Okay, so speaking of Chicago,
yes,
that's coming up July 13th. So as some of you probably saw on our social media, we got our first LA Not So Confidential t-shirts in. Yay! And Scott and I would like to give one of them away between now and the festival. So here's your mission. If you have not left us a 5-star review with a review on Apple Podcasts app, please go do that.
Please.
And we will put your name in the hat for one of our very first batches of T-shirts. We are going to take these to the festival with us, and then after that, we're planning on having them available for sale on the website. So they'll be available to the masses soon, but we want to be able to bring them to the people at the festival first. So please, Apple Podcasts, 5-star review. Tell us what you think about the podcast, and we're excited to give one of those away.
And hey, if you're on other discussion boards for other wonderful podcasts, there's so many good ones out there, and I'm just blown away how many good podcasts are out there. I can't keep up. I can't do enough cardio,
not enough,
and drive enough to keep up.
Commuting hours in the day.
I know, but it's wonderful, and we're please mention on other threads if you feel like it. That other listeners on your other favorite podcasts would like us, if it's appropriate. I don't want you to get banned from your admin.
Right.
But if you can, that's a great way. Word of mouth is the way this stuff works.
Totally.
And we can't wait to see what happens from the podcast festival. It's going to be great. But I'm sure we're going to gain some more listeners there and expand our base. And, keep the ideas coming in. We've got a couple of really fun episodes coming up. It doesn't necessarily sound fun, but I promise you, and I have stories. In this particular subject, we're going to be talking about stalkers in a few weeks,
yes.
And I have some unbelievable. I was a victim of stalking. I'm lucky that it was not violent, but it's the weirdest and funniest version of stalking that could possibly exist. So
I cannot wait.
I can't wait to tell you guys.
Okay, I think that's it. Episode 16 in the books, and we will see you next time on LA
Not So
Confidential.
Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.